Welcome back. You're watching The Money Show on ET Now. Buy or rent? This has been the question on every young individual's mind in India. It's a question that has been around for a very long time. But mind you, it's something that is more in the minds of perhaps the millennials, the more younger people who believe that maybe renting could be a bit of a better option instead of waiting for those EMI payments to be completed, and you'd rather use that money to spend it off on living in the moment, if you could call it that. And hence, buy versus rent has been a debate that has raged on for very long, and especially if you have to pick an argument between a parent and their kid, this is definitely one of the most common debates. So, and it's particularly gaining a lot of interest amid these times of COVID. In fact, many do say that if you are scouting a house for your use, where you want to live with your family or alone or however it is, and if you do have the money with you, or you can make arrangements of the money, for this purchase, now is actually the best time to go ahead and buy a house, because real estate developers are willing to roll out the red carpet for you, and of course prices as well have crashed. But that's the case even with rent. So let's take forward this conversation then with Mr. Anuj Puri, the chairman of ANAROCK, who's joining us now on the show. Mr. Puri, thank you so much for joining us today on The Money Show. It's a real pleasure having you with us. So for an individual who has to buy a property for his or her purchase, I guess the answer is pretty simple. That you would consider, maybe buying the property because, prices are so low, so depressed. Would you agree with that, Mr. Puri, that if somebody who's scouting for a house for a very long time and now finally has got this opportunity, maybe he's got some cash, this would be the best time to purchase a house for their consumption?
So certainly, I would say is for the end users, we're seeing a fair amount of interest coming back into the market. In fact, Bangalore is perhaps back to the pre-COVID levels in terms of the sales activity of good developers. I think several reasons why the end users are coming out. One, you articulated very well, that prices are more reasonable. Today, there are more deals that are being made available by good quality developers. But I think more importantly, many of these people have lived on rental accommodation where, the building societies have differentiated a tenant versus a flat owner. They've had different rules and regulations for a tenant in the same building society versus someone who was actually owning an apartment. Likewise, we saw is that many of the families are saying, we want safety, security. And you would remember roti, kapra or makan. Somewhere that makan definition we had forgotten. And I think times like these, we're discovering that it is coming more and more into play as far as an end user is concerned. I think your opening statement was very, very impactful, whether it is buy or lease. And clearly, if you are looking at it from an investment perspective, it doesn't make any sense for you to buy, because the rental yields on residential are not, what you will be able to get on the commercial office space. Rental yields are, staggering between 2 to 3% per annum. Office, you can get 8.5% per annum. So clearly, it is more advantageous for an investor to buy. Traditionally, investors used to buy residential because there was a capital appreciation. There was a growth in the value of the apartment. Today, we are not seeing that in the horizon. So clearly, it is for the end user, the market. The values are more reasonable. Perhaps the tenants haven't been treated that well. And most importantly, the home loan rates are at a 14-year low. Clearly, that has been a very attractive proposition from an end user to go out and buy. And that's where we are starting to see, energy come into cities like Bangalore.
Okay. So, Mr. Puri, that's of course about the purchase argument. If you have money with you and you've any which ways been scouting for a good property to live in with you or, with your family, now is the best time. Go ahead and do it. However, I guess it's a bit of bigger conundrum for those individuals who, would be, they already have their homes, but they are looking for a good investment avenue with what's happening with the equity markets, gold, of course, everybody has, and hence they are always looking out for real estate. Now, like you mentioned, appreciation, I think the best of the days of capital appreciation may now be behind us. And now the appreciation in real estate values is extremely slow. To make matters worse, you also have rental yields which are really poor. I mean, hardly 2 to 3%, which is extremely poor. So would you completely, write off real estate investment as a lucrative investment option for those people who are looking at it purely from an investment perspective? And for now, of course, Mr. Puri, I'm just talking about residential.
Yes, very good question. I would say for the investor, three things if you're getting, then you look at it. One, if it's a launch of a credible developer. Usually launch is at a very base price. And we've seen in the past that, as the product continues to develop, the prices continue to go up. So there is a potential capital appreciation. But, again, I put it in inverted commas of a good, developer. The second is if there is a scheme that is running, again, of a good developer. Many of the schemes that are there today that you pay 10% today and you pay 90% once it's ready. Those actually stack up pretty well when you look at the IRR because you're only paying 10% today. And the balance 90% you're going to pay once the developer completes the entire building and has got the occupation certificate and hands over that apartment to you. So the math, the investment thesis works on that. And the third is that if there are any distressed deals, if there are deals that are very, very nicely available, particularly in the secondary market where somebody else is wanting to sell because there is distress. So I would say for an investor, those will be the three things. At the time of a launch of a credible developer, if there is a scheme, which is usually called as subvention scheme, and it's 10-90, 10% you pay today, 90% you pay on possession, the math really works well. And the third is if there is a sweet deal that is available in the market.
All right, so those are some, I guess you could consider it as a checklist of sorts. And once a particular potential investment investment in property does meet this criteria, then perhaps you could consider it as a good investment. This is purely, of course, for residential real estate. For commercial realty, of course, then it's a totally different ball game. It may be a bit more complex as well, because usually we look at commercial realty as a thing that's reserved for the more institutional investors. Yeah. What about those individuals who are looking to rent property then, Mr. Puri? Yes, go ahead, Mr. Puri, you're making a point.
Sorry, I was just saying on the commercial one, I was just going to complete that sentence. What you said is that it's largely an institutional play other than the REIT, which, SEBI started and we had the first REIT come in last year. The second REIT is ongoing today. As we speak, that'll be the second launch of the REIT. So, those are where you will be able to get in retail investors to come in and participate, which is where you can play on the commercial with very limited investment of, 2, 3, 4, 5 lakh rupees that you're able to buy REIT units. And hence the ability of a small investor to come in and play on the commercial market is there. Otherwise, it's largely, as you rightly said, an institutional investors play.
Yeah, the REIT, the Real Estate Investment Trust, is definitely an avenue where the retail investor as well could take part in the story. Maybe in a way could be considered as fractional investment, but of course it's not exactly that on paper. It's completely different. But yeah, Mr. Puri, again, coming back to the entire rent versus buy conundrum. Today, for a millennial, what would you advise them? Look, it's one thing or the other, right? You either take out a home loan and pay EMIs or you pay rent. And in a city like Mumbai, the rent can get pretty expensive because at the end of the day, even property prices are very expensive. So for those millennials in metro cities or Gen Zs as well, who will soon, attain the age of more than 20, etc., buy versus rent, what should be what should be in their minds, or what should be the criteria they should consider before making a decision of buy versus rent? And I'm of course talking about, things like you mentioned, capital appreciation, rental yields, etc.
I'm a big supporter for an end user to go out and buy. And several reasons for that, I would say, is, one is financial security, safety. We've seen how the stock market behaved during these COVID times. It's also a physical asset. It's also a roof, over your head. It's also an asset once it gets created. It's a safety net for the family. It's also an asset that you buy in today, maybe a smaller apartment, maybe a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom. As you continue to grow in your career, you are able to then move on to a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom as the family continues to increase. From the perspective of the first home buy, I would say is, buy it earlier than, later. And also, it has now been, the statistics in India are showing is that in the year 2000, the average home buyer's age was in its 40s. Today in 2019, the average home buyer's age is 28. So, it is significantly coming down. So we are starting to see a lot more younger guys doing their first home acquisition.
Mr. Puri, we've already spoken about how, the rental yields in residential realty is, not that great, barely 3% odd. And, the capital appreciation as well that, mind you, many did enjoy in the 2000s, I guess. That's really slowed down now. What's your view on commercial realty? Mind you, we are in the midst of this lockdown. A lot of restaurants are shutting down. Retail as well is struggling. But there are aspects like warehousing, etc., which is, showing some promise. So, and mind you, the leases on commercial realty as well are a bit better. The yields over there as well are a bit better. So, as an investment, what's your view on commercial realty?
So I would divide the commercial into 3 parts. One is the offices, second is industrial warehousing, and the third is the retail. Retail, as you rightly said, is suffering big time, whether it is high street retail or retail in the malls, whether it's fashion, whether it's F&B, whether it's cinema, everywhere. That is one thing that I would say is suffering greatly and will continue to suffer until we get the vaccine. So clearly that's an asset class that I would say is best avoided at this time by investors. The industrial and warehousing is just blowing off. I mean, that is one thing that we're just seeing a huge amount of appetite from both the lessees, which are the tenants, from the developers who are wanting to get into this game, and from private equity investors. So clearly it's a game where we feel is that e-commerce companies will continue to come in, take more space on warehousing. But more importantly, we're seeing data centers come into this. We're seeing industrial manufacturing being outsourced from the US, now looking to get into India. So that's a very good sector. It's an emerging sector. It's a sector which I would say has picked up in the last 3-4 months, the momentum that it has, which we are seeing today. And finally, it'll be the offices. I think there is a lot of discussion going on the office, work from home. So is it a good opportunity to invest in office space or not? I think offices are going to be here to stay. We saw this in 2008 after the global financial crisis as well. So, it does have a low sentiment, but it comes back very quickly. And I do feel as an investment proposition, I would certainly look at the industrial warehousing and I would look at the offices. Those are the 2 sectors. I would be pretty slow on the retail part.
Okay. Well, rightly so. I mean, commercial realty is not like residential realty. You've got to divide it up into, different segments. Which sector of the economy are you catering to? But Mr. Puri, thank you so much, for taking out time today and joining us on The Money Show with your very valuable inputs on this entire conundrum that a lot of people are facing. Firstly, whether to rent or buy, and whether to invest in residential, especially when rental yields are so low.